So this is the honest answer. I think my back injury started a hard season for me that I'm in right now. And that's just the truth. Like I told Chad earlier, I was like, man, I really want to go on this podcast and I want to help people. But I have like some imposter syndrome because I'm in a season right now where I'm dealing with anxiety and panic attacks. And the pessimist, the negative part of me that's talking down to myself is like, how are you going to go on a podcast and tell people about how to be in recovery well when you're suffering and you're struggling? It's wild. Panic attacks are so wild. What I start to fear is how it's impacting my day-to-day. Like, okay, I have this podcast coming up with Kenny. What if I have a panic attack?
You said that you were getting off of SSRIs. Is that true for this period of time that you're dealing with this?
It's a great question.
I know you had mentioned an experience with kratom.
I was very naive and I learned a good lesson from that. I was going to this herb shop and I would go in there for all my vitamins and supplements. And then one day I was in there talking about anxiety and there was this nurse from the local hospital and she was buying it and she was like, this stuff has changed my life. It's helped my anxiety. And here's where I messed up. The guy at the herb shop said, now don't trust what you read online about this stuff. And the first time I tried it, it was so subtle that I was kind of like, what was that? Like, did I feel something? And I got to a point that I said, it's fine. If it gets bad enough, I'll check myself into treatment. That was my solution. But in this moment, I'm going to do it anyway. I wanted so badly to tell somebody, but there was so much shame around I relapsed. Like I did it. I am in an addiction again. I am hooked to a substance and I need help to get off of it.
Okay, so let's talk about your spirituality.
So that's another area of my life where you're going to get the honest truth and you're not going to get what sounds good.
The Patina'd Podcast is about the earned wisdom found in pain. It's about chasing failure, catching it, and using that as an opportunity. It's about scar tissue and sinew. It's about stretch marks and dented fenders and refusing to hide them. It's about pushing our insecurities and shame to the forefront instead of behind us. Instead of seeing rust as something that compromises a structure's integrity, we choose to see it as the grit that builds character. This is the Patina'd Podcast.
All right. So my guest today here on the Patina'd Podcast is Brooke Wright. And for those of you who don't know who Brooke is, she's a recovering drug addict. She's a photographer. She's a member of the 3 of 7 project. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. And I suspect your role with the 3 of 7 project is like a behind the scenes organizer. If I were to ask you to remove humility for a second and be honest, are you the person behind the scenes who's kind of organizing everything? That's just my assumption of it.
Short version of my history with 3 of 7 project. Blake and Chad in 2018 said, we want to start a company. They came up with the idea. Chad and I had just both, he quit his career in the Navy. I quit my career with the DOD. And we moved back to Georgia. So we were both free to start this company. His brother Blake was still working full time with a wife and 2 kids at home. And so the plan was for Chad and I to build the business up to a point that Blake could quit his full-time job and then we could all come together. So I helped build the company. And then it's kind of funny. Chad and I found out that we do marriage really well together. Our marriage is wonderful. We are best friends. But when we were put in a business situation together, it really impacted our marriage. And so, and then his brother, and then there was like these moments where like I kind of felt like he had to choose over me and his brother. I don't know. There was just a lot of things. And so I stepped back from the business when I started working once we moved back here in Georgia. Officially, I am not an employee of 307. However, as you were indicating, if I were to remove the humility, I am, I am, my hand is in a lot of events. I'm like the full-time photographer. There's certain events like ultra races that we do that is strictly me.
Mm.
Like the guys are like, if you want to do a race, do it, but we're not helping until day of. And I'm like, heard. It's really nice. I kind of dabble where I want to, but I also get to still feel like I'm a part of it. I think it just allows for me to serve people. Like the races to me, that's my go-to. I like to serve people. I like to do things for people. And so when they give me the freedom to use the platform that they've built, this reach of so many people to like create an event, to create a space for people to come together and do something fun, it makes me feel really like, I mean, if, like, yeah, I just feel valuable and I feel like I can make an impact on people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's very cool. Yeah, and I know Pierce Show was there, and so I was kind of
Yes.
following him as he was at it. And I guess the aid stations were pretty crazy. You had like taco trucks out there, and you had all this other stuff out there, right? Like
Oh,
massage
dude,
things and
I'm so bougie. If I'm planning an event and I have the time, yeah, we had like 2 massage therapists, we had food trucks, we had a coffee truck. Now this is all local, so that's another thing I'm very passionate about is like if we're putting on an event, I want to bring money and business to our community, you know?
yeah,
So I'm pulling from our local community for all of these people. And then First Form came out, one of our sponsors, and they hooked everybody up with stuff. I mean, yeah, it was super bougie race, man. But the hill and the mountain was not bougie. So it was fun. It was great.
yeah. You're a part of the 3 of 7 Projects podcast, which is I listen to it on Spotify, but it's also on YouTube. So
Should be, yeah.
For people who don't already listen to 3 of 7 Project or haven't heard of Chad Wright or Brooke Wright. So Chad Wright is a retired Navy SEAL, and he's basically in the world of resilience, which is the world that I'm highly interested in and what this podcast is about. He's one of those people that when he speaks, you take note of it and you take heed of the wisdom that's coming from him, because it's all earned wisdom. It's nothing that he is sharing that is just like he read out of a book or he thought like, this is really smart to say, I should say this. Like he's the star of the podcast, right? Like he's the main, I guess, draw for people. Chili's on there, which is I want to say he's just like a character, but I have a feeling he's really that guy.
He's really that guy.
Yeah, that's very interesting that he's really that guy. Especially because you think he's probably like 55. You think like he's like this old grizzled. He's not. He's like, I don't know. What is he, 24 or something? But I don't know. He's a young guy and he looks young, but like when you hear him talk just in the audio, you're like, this guy, like he's been around the block. He's lived some hard years. So anyway, but the draw is your husband, Chad. And what I really love about the podcast is when there's the star of the podcast is meant to be catered to by the people around the star, right? Like make the star look more like a star essentially. And that is not your guys' podcast. Like you guys call him out on so much stuff and I love it. I love it. And like he's like, I don't want to say just as resistant or defensive as any other human being who's being called out. He's much less so, but you can tell he has this like initial twinge of like, I don't like that you're saying this right now. But then he kind of absolves it and he's like, yeah, true. Like I need to stop nicotine or something, right? Like I think Chili one day was making fun of him for riding his bike and calling it an endurance sport. So with stuff like that's like good, funny content, but also I love the fact that the star is there just for as much ridicule and accountability as anybody else in the show. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. We're all there. I mean, if you've listened enough, you know that the trash talk goes all the way around the circle. Like they'll all they usually generally pick on me and give me a hard time no matter what. But like you're saying, like if anybody's feeling something about the way someone's saying something, or somebody's being a hypocrite in the advice they're giving to thousands of people listening to the podcast, they'll get called out. I mean, it's not it's not a safe place, you know?
I like that dynamic. Okay, Brooke. Well, let's get into your origin story, if that's okay.
Okay. Yes. So my childhood was pretty, and this is always hard for me because like I know other people, Chad struggles with this too. I want to be real about my struggles with childhood, but I don't want my parents to listen to this and, feel hurt or feel attacked because at where I'm at, I think I'm doing pretty good in life. But if I were to have kids, I currently do not have kids. I'm in my 30s. I would be good at some things and I would not be good at a lot of things. And that would 100% impact my child. So let me just preface that and say, Mom and Dad, if you listen to this, that you did a great job. You did the best. I believe they did the best they could do. Right. But the looking back, my parents were married, still are married. I have a younger sibling who has cerebral palsy. So that had an impact on me, having a special needs sibling. She was younger. But I think, the work I've done, I've been clean since 2015, and the work I've done has led me to realize that, like, my parents went through a lot of crap as adults and as kids. But they both had really traumatic things happen to them. And some of the stuff, it wasn't their whole lifetime they dealt with, issues with their parents and abuse. And coming from that, I didn't have an open dialogue about emotions and about, well, how are you feeling? It's okay to feel mad. It's okay to feel sad. But when you're feeling that way, here's how we can deal with it. Or, my dad's generation, he's close to 70. It was that toughen up buttercup. Like, let's not, like, talking about feelings or therapy or any of that was really taboo and not accepted. So as a kid, I don't think I ever really learned how to connect well with my emotions or how I felt. And I became a people pleaser, like deep people pleaser. I had a sister with cerebral palsy, and I wanted to keep everyone in the family happy and everything peaceful. Fast forward to when I was about 14, 15, I got in with a friend group that was not the best friend group. And there were drugs and there were alcohol. And I dabbled in everything, but I was 15. Well, let me back up. 13 or 14, I got my wisdom teeth out. And I took the narcotics from my wisdom teeth. I took the whole prescription in 2 days. And my mom came to me and she said, "Hey, where did all these pills go?" And I said, "Oh, it helps me sleep. It helped me sleep. So I took them." Like, we all know that's wacko. Like, that's insane. No, like, your teenager just downed a whole prescription in 2 days. But it kind of just got let go. So that was my first, like, okay, something's going on. That should have been a red flag.
I just wanted to take a quick pause and genuinely thank you for getting this far through the episode. This podcast is very small if you haven't noticed, so every like, every comment, every follow or subscribe, it really makes a difference. So my only request from you is to interact with the content if you like it. Like and follow, rate and review, and share if you feel like this is something that's worthy of sharing. Thank you so much.
Fast forward to my friend group. I was introduced to someone one night gave me a Roxy, which is like Oxycontin. And I remember the first night I took it and I was in a car and I was so nauseous, ended up having to pull over to let me puke. But as soon as the next day, I wanted more. And that began my journey of going from dabbling And like, if I had the opportunity to take somebody's medicine out of their cabinet and get away with it. And after that, I transitioned into all day, everyday use, multiple jobs to keep the money rolling in so I could continue to use at the level I wanted to. Um, I was working as a waitress and doing just a bunch of really shady stuff on the side to get money. And at this time in my story, Chad, my husband, and I had been dating, and he had gone off to go to the Navy. And he had come back, got a heart surgery, left again. This whole time I was using, but it wasn't terrible. He went back in the Navy a second time after getting a heart surgery so he could get back in. When he left the second time was when I escalated to heavy, heavy use, and also mixing in different drugs and just cocktails that nobody should be doing. I went up to visit Chad. He had this little shack in Virginia Beach, and he was finally at his SEAL team and done with training. I want you to move in with me. I want to start a life together. And I thought, okay, this is perfect. I don't want to use drugs anymore. I'm tired of this. I know every drug dealer this side of Dallas, Atlanta, Marietta. Like, if I get out of here, geographic relocation, right? Like, I'll get clean. Like, I have no choice. And then I'll be with the man that I love and I'll be happier. And so I moved in with him, and I had bought some Suboxone to like titrate down when I moved there. I was like, I had it all planned out, man. It was like my life was just going to turn around magically. And got there. I think I had like 2 weeks worth of Suboxone. Got done with that, started withdrawing, and I was like, oh, hell no. Like, I can't do this. So I started doctor shopping. And this was like 2012-ish, before it was before they had like the big systems that didn't allow you to do that. It was right before that. So I got in deep doctor shopping, and I had like this whole illness made up. Like, I had like chronic stomach pain that I was running off of with multiple doctors, and that turned into anxiety. So I was on all sorts of pain meds, and I was on Xanax and Klonopin, and that lasted in Virginia Beach for just about 2 years. And during these 2 years, I knew nobody. I had moved up there with Chad, and I didn't know a soul. And he was gone all the time. Like, I'm talking about all the time. There was
Just
one
training,
year.
right? Just
Yeah,
constantly in
yeah.
training. Yeah.
Yes. And so I was home alone 90% of the time, which was just a fuel for my addiction. So in the end of 2014, I had a couple instances where when he was gone, I went to sleep and didn't wake up for like 2 days. Like, woke up, the dog had crapped on the floor. I was like, what day is it? What's going on? And those were moments where I was like, okay, I can't, like, I'm going to die. I mean, I had tried a million different ways. I had bought those little lock boxes that, like, you set a timer on. I had tried to titrate down. And honestly, the main thing in those moments that like kept me grounded was this little dog he had bought for me before he deployed that I was obsessed with. My addict mind was so jacked up. I wasn't thinking about dying. I was thinking, if I can't get straight, I can't take care of this dog, and I'm going to lose this dog. Isn't that crazy? So I came to him. We were sitting on the beach one night, and I just said, I'm addicted to these drugs. I want to get healthy. I want to get better. And like, I don't know what to do. And he's like, well, I don't know what to do either. He knew, like, years ago, I had come up to visit him, and I had been hospitalized for something reasonable. And he was looking for my ID, and he found Suboxone in my wallet and Googled it and was like, why do you have this? But I think he loved me so much, and he knew he wanted to be with me. And he was kind of choosing to ignore, or he knew with his career he didn't have the time to help me tackle it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
he was so busy. I mean, when you're new to a SEAL team, you're at the bottom and you got to do everything. So
Mm-hmm.
when I told him on the beach that I needed help, he's like, okay, well, we're going to figure this out. And I ended up at a detox facility in Virginia Beach, probably less than 48 hours in the detox. I was like, no, I'm not doing this. And I knew I had a prescription refill for one of my pain pills. So I called Chad and made up some lies about how the place was unfit and they weren't taking care of me and I was going to do this on my own. Like I had tools I needed now. And he had no prior experience. He had no way of knowing like what the right thing was or that I was manipulating him, you know? So he came and got me. Fast forward probably 2 months. I'm still using. He knows. I know. I concede. He concedes. And round 2, I go to detox. I make it through detox 5 days. Terrible. And then he tells me I need to go to rehab, and the detox people are telling me I need to go to rehab. And I'm like, no, y'all, I'm not doing that. I ended up going to rehab, stayed 28 days, got out. And it wasn't clean after that. Like it wasn't like this miraculous recovery. And they gave me gabapentin and immediately put me on SSRIs. And I started abusing the gabapentin.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just so desperate and I wasn't ready to be done, you know? And it was a couple months after that I had drove home to see my family and I found myself breaking into somebody's house because I knew they had drugs. And on the drive back home, when I was leaving and I was taking the last pill that I had stole from these people, I was just like thinking, I had a moment of clarity of like what was happening, like what I did, how much I had been through to get clean and how I had reverted back. And I just made a decision in that moment. Like I was driving down the highway on the way back to Virginia at night. And I was like, this is it. And it's never worked for me before. But in that moment, I was like, this is the last pill I'm taking, period. And it was. But we all know, like, once I had made peace with like, okay, I'm done with the drugs, the hard work was next, right? Like getting that detachment from your drug of choice for me was the beginning of something I'm still working through. Like that was 2015. That was 9 years ago. And I'm still growing, still healing, still finding out things about myself and my past. So yeah, that's my nutshell version.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what I could see there's like this correlation. Are you aware of what the window of tolerance is?
No.
So the window of tolerance is there's different models to this, but the one I gravitate towards when I'm working with clients is the first thing I teach my clients is the window of tolerance. And the window of tolerance, long story short, is helps explain in a very simplistic way how to build up resiliency. And so the way you are explaining your story is this slow build up to that point where you are at peace. It went from maybe initially there was some intrinsic desire to stop, but at first there was an extrinsic desire to stop too. It was like maybe because you wanted to be better for Chad, or maybe because of the dog, right? So there's this extrinsic reason of why you need to get better. It's not because I want to be better for me, it's I want to be better for whatever externally.
Right.
And then, and I know so many people who have years of sobriety who that was their first route to sobriety, was they were forced because of some consequence to go into treatment, and then in treatment it began to turn internal, and then there was a shift for them, right? Which
Yeah.
kind of goes beyond one of the myths that I really disdain in sobriety, is that you have to want it for yourself, because it's short-sighted. The statement is short-sighted. Like if the statement was, if you want it for yourself, you have a higher likelihood of success, then there you go. There's a more accurate statement. But I know many
Right.
people that have gotten sober because they didn't want it for themselves, but they wanted it for some other thing. And for you, like basically how I'm equating the window of tolerance and this experience for you is maybe there's this intrinsic value where you didn't want it for yourself, like the dog. But over a period of time, there's this progression of the consequence of shame or the consequence of having to come and tell this man that you love, I'm screwing up again, or
Mhm.
or the shame of trying to sneak around, but you know that he knows that you know that he knows, and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
And this kind of whole thing, and eventually getting to this place where you're robbing somebody and you're taking that last pill, and the overwhelming shame with that of being like, oh
Mm.
no, I want this for me now. That shift, I think, is a pretty big thing for you there, and how it's kind of playing in my head.
Yeah, I don't even need to add anything. I think that's super accurate.
Mm. Like anybody who's listening that's been sober and sustained sobriety knows that early stage early stage sobriety is like, there's some people where, there's the pink cloud. I'm sure you're aware of the pink cloud, but there's the pink cloud. I didn't get the pink cloud, but a
I
lot of
didn't.
people
Yeah.
get the pink cloud where there's this experience of, I think the pink cloud is like this euphoric feeling of like doing something that you thought was impossible, like being
Mm.
able to be free from this substance, and you didn't think you could do it for years and years and years, and now you're doing it. And so there's almost this euphoria that can come with that. I didn't get
Mm.
that in my experience. I didn't get the pink cloud. But for the people who don't get the pink cloud, there's this more experience of like huge dopamine shift. Your dopamine levels are so below baseline that
Yes.
just waking up, you're already below baseline. So you wake up feeling bored, you wake up feeling lethargic, you wake up feeling like just blah, and like, is this really what it's all about? How was that experience for you, early sobriety?
That was exactly. So right when I got sober, like I said, I was abusing both pain pills and benzodiazepines.
Hmm.
So my post-acute, dude, it lasted so long. I got no pink cloud. In rehab, towards the end of rehab, when I finally got out of withdrawals, which took probably 2.5 weeks, I had a little pink cloud for probably like 4 or 5 days.
Hmm.
And as soon as I got out, exactly what you described, I just crashed. I've I've tried to put it into words for people how I felt. I felt flat. Like I couldn't feel anything. Like I wanted to feel sad. I wanted to feel angry. I wanted to feel happy ideally, but at some point I was just like I just want to feel something, you know? And I told Chad one day I said, "I think you could hand me a winning lottery ticket right now and I would just look at you. Like I can't feel anything." Like I've always loved music and probably a solid 6 months after I first got sober, like, I couldn't enjoy music. Like, my favorite songs would just it's there I wouldn't feel anything, and that was just
Hmm.
it was rough, and I remember thinking, like, "How long is this gonna last? Why am I doing this? What" and I was going to NA at the time, and I was reading books, and everyone was just telling me, like, "It will get better." And so I guess, obviously, I decided that that was better than using because I stuck with it. But towards the middle of that, I was also dealing with a lot of body aches for a long time, like a long time. I was probably about 6 months. I was like, "Okay, I'm not feeling better. I feel worse." I was still smoking cigarettes. I had been smoking since I was, like, 15. And I decided, "I'm gonna start eating good, I'm gonna quit smoking, and I'm gonna start exercising." And so I told Chad that, and he's like, "Great." And he takes me on a 2-mile run on like a completely flat trail. And I like, dude, I almost died. I was like, I can't do this. Like, I'm not going to be able to work out. And, I was just I didn't think I was capable of anything. But I joined a local gym in town and built a baseline level of fitness. It took me months to quit smoking. That was really hard, but I quit smoking, turned my diet completely around. Really, genuinely, I replaced my addiction to drugs with like an obsession with fitness and wellness.
Mm.
Like, I believed that that was going to make me feel better. And there are faults in how much I shifted my mindset to that. And I still deal with the repercussions of making that hard shift before coping normally.
In what way? In what way was it? Would you say there were
Like,
mistakes in that?
because I still deal with believing, like being obsessive about my wellness, my diet. Um, I believe that it impacts me more than it actually does. And I assign so much weight to it.
Mm.
Like, there are times where if I don't get to eat healthy, if I'm traveling or if work's crazy or something, I will believe that that's going to negatively impact my like moment to moment of the day. And
Mhm.
it does. If you eat poorly, it can make you feel bad. It can make you sluggish. It's true, but I take it to the extreme.
Mm.
Um, and I think part of that is my nature. And I also do think part of it is that was how I coped. That was what I felt like I could have control over in that early recovery season. Like, okay, I can make myself feel better with this. And I gave it so much power. And now that I'm older, I'm trying to kind of undo some of that a little bit. Like, I still want fitness, health, and wellness to be the top of my priority along with faith and my family. But if I can't work out, like I had a back injury for the first time around Christmas. And dude, my coping went to trash.
Mm.
I couldn't work out. I couldn't run. I couldn't do anything for 2 weeks. I couldn't bend over. And I realized like, whoa, I I kind of put all my eggs in one basket, you know?
Mm.
But I haven't been faced with a challenge where I haven't been able to work out for 4 weeks since I've been sober, since 2015. So there are moments that I don't regret any of it because it got me to where I am now and I feel secure in my sobriety. But I think if I had of got a therapist and really worked on like some foundational coping strategies of when I feel stressed, when I feel anxious, when I feel mad or sad, what do I do with it? You know?
Mhm.
I don't and not use food or use exercise to try to modulate the way I feel.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's good. Like for me, I had a back injury probably, gosh, 3 years ago now. I was deadlifting. I was feeling really, really good. I decided that day it was going to be 500 pounds. That
Oh
was the day.
gosh.
That was the day I was going to do 500 pounds. And I like
Sure.
it. I think where I was at was around 440, and so. But I was feeling so good, and I was going through my warm up so clean. Everything just felt good. I'm like, today's 500 pounds. So I got to, I think it was 440. I would have to check my notes. It's something like that. And then went ahead and put on 500 and I went for it. And it was still, as I think about it, it was a terrifying moment because I got, so technically I lifted 500 pounds because I got maybe a quarter of an inch off the ground. and, and I heard a pop
Mm.
audibly, like a loud pop. I didn't feel any pain, but my knees gave out. And
Oh,
my knees just stopped, and I laid there on all fours, just kind of assessing,
like what
like,
just happened?
what just happened? I don't feel any pain, but I'm also feeling, like, this huge adrenaline, like, almost like seeing stars. I was seeing stars and, like, feeling this adrenaline wave through my almost like tingles through my entire body, and so I'm just like, "Okay, assessing, okay." Laid there for maybe a minute or 2 or in this all fours, just stayed there still for, like, 2 minutes and then went to get up, and as I got up, all this pain shot from my lower back, I dropped down, and I was like, "Okay." and all this fear, these fearful thoughts of like, what am I going to do now? Like, how am I going to support my family? Like,
Yes.
I sit in a chair for a living, doing therapy with people, but still I'm
Yeah.
like, I can't sit. If my back is ruined, I can't sit down for hours on end. I'm going to be uncomfortable. I'm not going to be able to attune to my client's needs, all this stuff. And anyway, and so it was like maybe 2 weeks before this incident where I learned about DDP yoga. And have you heard of DDP yoga?
No.
Diamond Dallas Page yoga. He like so he was a professional wrestler with all these crazy back injuries, and then he started getting into yoga to heal his back injuries, and he created his own form of yoga. It's yoga, but it's his style of yoga to help people get back in shape who are morbidly obese or have chronic pain issues and all this stuff. And so he has this very modified form of yoga where you're basically sitting down in a chair and you're doing cat cow in a chair, barely leaning over in a chair, just to start to build. And so I started looking at videos on it, and literally like I would kind of roll out of bed or roll to the side of bed and then like put my feet off to the side of bed. So I'm like, and kind of move myself to where I'm sitting up and just start doing cat cow sitting there. But yeah, I too had this moment of like, here goes one of my primary things that I do for medicinal purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, exercise is very medicinal. Like it's not the number on a scale. It's not what I look like in a mirror. Sometimes it's numbers on a page because I'm trying to be a previous version of myself or something, right? With weights or something. But other than that performance stuff, like I see exercise as medicinal, which is, I don't see it as supplementary. I see it as necessary. And so I front load what I'm going to do the same way somebody who's taking medication would like prioritize the medication that they're taking, you know?
Yes.
So anyway, so when all that was gone, I think I can resonate with that moment of like, okay, what am I going to do now? Like,
Yes.
what tools do I have? Now, luckily at the time I was sober for many years and I feel like I work a pretty good program. So I was able to adapt in a few different areas. Like I said, meditation was a pretty big one for me. But yeah, for you, you're coming to this point in your nutrition and exercise journey where you're realizing if you have a bad night or you happen to be away for the weekend and you're not able to keep to the nutritional regimen that you have or the physical exercise regimen that you have, like not everything's going to fall. Like you realize you have enough
Right.
sort of equity built up in routine and consistency that you can get back to it relatively quickly.
Yes. Yes.
Good.
But like I said, I still struggle with the balancing, prioritizing it, but also assigning the like realistic amount of value to exercise and fitness, or exercise and wellness and diet. Yeah.
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 Yeah. And so what are you doing right now for your back? And what skills have you learned since December to try to help mitigate that?
Yeah. So the pain, I was really surprised at how well I dealt with the pain. If you would have asked me months ago or let me know that that was going to happen, and like all I could use was ibuprofen, but I did fine with the pain. I mean, there were definitely days where I was done with it. You know, I was just exhausted. And when you're in pain, that's all you can focus on. So, this is the honest answer. I think my back injury started a hard season for me that I'm in right now. And that's just the truth. Like I told Chad earlier, I was like, man, I really want to go on this podcast and I want to help people, but I have like some imposter syndrome because I'm in a season right now where I'm dealing with anxiety and panic attacks. And the pessimist, the negative part of me that's talking down to myself is like, how are you going to go on a podcast and tell people about how to be in recovery well when you're suffering and you're struggling? And the reality is, I think this is the best time for me to
Yeah.
come on a podcast like this, is because like if you would have had me on last fall, I would have been like, "Oh my gosh, Kenny, recovery is wonderful. It's great. My life is great. Everything's awesome." And that's not the reality of what most drug addicts are going to go through in their lifetime once they get sober. I think most of us have embedded things that we struggled with before we started using, and some of us will completely overcome those. And like, I've made peace with the fact that I might be like a more anxious, on edge person, and I can develop tools, but it kind of runs in my family and it's something I'm just going to have to deal with. So, all that to say, the back injury, like, I have like a distrust of my body that comes up sometimes. Like, the simple version would, like, I will call myself a hypochondriac when I'm being mean to myself. You know what I mean? When certain thoughts are coming in, I don't know if I'm okay. I don't know if I'm well. I don't know if my body's doing okay. It's hard for me to feel secure in my body sometimes. So when I hurt my back, and then as we talked about, my major medicine, I like using it like that, or my coping, which was exercise, was taken away from me. I made it like through the first 3 or 4 weeks because I was just so overwhelmed with getting through the pain and every day. But now that I'm starting to move again, I'm not back to 100%, but I'm working out. I can get my heart rate up again. But in that time frame, I started having panic attacks, and it's not related to anything specific. I can just be in my car driving home from the gym, just had a great workout, had a great conversation with my buddy, and all of a sudden it's like I can't breathe. I need to, like, just that, it's just a wave, and it'll stick around for hours. And I've had seasons like this before. I've had 2 of them in my life in sobriety, and I know they're temporary, and I know I've just gotta work on some thought pathways that I have, and some negative loops and some rumination that I just kind of fell into headlong before I realized what was happening. But that is the long answer to say I didn't do well when I hurt my back.
Mm.
Like, I was not successful when my exercise was taken away from me, but I'm gaining ground now. Like, right now, I'm fighting my way back to peace and to, like, taking control of my negative thoughts and taking control over what is causing these panic attacks. So, I think this is gonna be an awesome season for me of learning. The back injury and exercise being taken away from me, and then the panic attacks follow, and just the overall disruption to the way that I like to do things. I think in a couple months, when I'm on the other side of this, I'm gonna have a lot of really cool things that I learned, you know?
Yeah,
But right now, I'm still in the thick of it, if that makes any sense.
it does. And like what you just said is huge. And it's huge for you to kind of have that, even if it feels fake or inauthentic, where it feels forced, like from a window of tolerance perspective or from a resiliency perspective, it is attained by doing things that we don't want to do, but we know we ought to do, is the short
Mhm.
version. But there's also this ability for that window of tolerance or for our resiliency to be fed just through hope of something potential in the future. Like, and just how you just said it, in this season, I'm going through this time and I have this feeling that it will get better. And that feeling of it will get better. First of all, that has to come through a previous experience where you have done something similar, where you've gone through a trial and it got better. So your own life wisdom has taught you that this is one of those times. It
Mhm.
sucks and it feels like maybe there isn't a light at the end of the tunnel,
Mhm.
especially if it's early on in that season. But your own earned wisdom that you've experience through life says, no, actually, but I know the voice in here is telling me that's nonsense and that it's not going to get any better. But experience is telling me something different. Experience is telling me on the other end of this, I'm going to have so much more greater capacity for resilience as a result of this current experience, So, yeah, that's huge. And I appreciate your integrity and honesty with that. So you explained that well. The difference between anxiety attack and panic attack is, one is you just don't know, like it seems nonsensical almost why you're experiencing it.
It's wild. Panic attacks are so wild. They're so powerful because I've developed, like I said, this is my third season of panic attacks, so it's not new for me. And I will generally develop panic disorder where I am scared. Like what I'm fearing is the panic attack itself because it's so powerful. And it's not, for me, it's not like I don't like it. It's uncomfortable. What I start to fear is how it's impacting my day to day. Like, okay, I have this podcast coming up with Kenny. What if I have a panic attack? I have this race I'm planning that I have to stand up in front of 200 people. And those aren't normally triggers for me. Like I said, I don't really know what my triggers are in seasons like this. I can't pinpoint it. It just comes. But yeah, it's if no one's ever experienced like an intense panic attack, I feel like Chad looks at me. He is so supportive and he's wonderful. But I'm a quiet panic attack person. I just sit there and like I don't scream, I don't shake, I don't yell, I don't cry. I'm just like in my head fighting, battling, And so he looks at me and he's like, You're fine. You're okay. And I'm like, no, man, I'm not okay. But I don't know why I got off on that tangent. I think I just like talking about it just because I feel like for me, it's a subject that I could feel a lot of shame around if I allowed those thoughts to come in. And so I like to share that I struggle with it because I feel like a lot of people struggle with them, but it kind of seems weak. So I think a lot of people don't open up and share with other people that they have this.
It's interesting because the assumption is it seems weak, so don't talk about it. The image I have, I don't know you, right? But the image I have of you from just listening to the podcast or like being a fan of 3 of 7 Project is like the opposite of weak, like it's somebody who's highly resilient, which is why I've asked you on this podcast. And so now I feel that even more because of your bravery to speak up in this area that somebody would otherwise feel like they're too weak to speak up on it. I think I can't remember which episode it is, 3 maybe. Had a longtime buddy, Brian Lewis, on, and we got sober around the same time. He's a combat veteran too. I have PTSD, combat related PTSD. So does he. He also has sexual trauma related PTSD from childhood and different things. He kind of was talking about his experience where it's like, just like you, he was opening up. He's like, man, I hit therapy so hard. I've been doing this for 16 years. Like every chance I get, I'm jumping into some type of group therapy. Whatever the VA is offering me that I can go in and get, I'm jumping straight into it because I need it. And he said, I got a battalion behind me. That's his skill set. His skill set is he has a battalion behind him. And anytime his thought is off, anytime he's having a nightmare, anytime there's something that needs to be attended to, he puts out the bat signal and there's somebody at his front door immediately. Right. And so I to me, that's strength because that allows for what we do incredibly well, which is adaptability to new circumstances, right? Like as human beings, we have the capacity, if we allow ourselves to be highly resilient towards change and take on new circumstances. And that's what that is, right? Being able to acknowledge, like, here's something that I'm going through now, being honest about it and asking for help. That's such an incredible tool. Like, that's the skill set right there, asking for help when you need it,
Yes.
and being willing to change and adapt. Yeah, that's incredible.
Oh yeah. And I love your buddies. Like his coping is people and a team and a community. And that is one of the pillars of my recovery. But also, like, when I get in a hard season like this, I'm like him. I am I have, my 3 or 4 close friends. I have Chad, I have my gym community. I was having a panic attack the other day and I was close to my gym. So I knew there was a workout going on. I drove to my gym, went and sat down on the mat amongst all them working out and just sat there just to be in their presence. And a couple of them were like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I'm okay. I'm having a panic attack. This is a hard season for me, but I'm okay."
Mm.
And like, again, you alluded to it earlier, like brutal honesty is my policy. Like, I don't overshare. I'm not going to tell the person at Publix my whole life story about panic attacks and anxiety. But if it's somebody I know can handle it and they can support me, I've learned to share where I'm at. Like, honestly, don't try to protect my pride. Don't try to protect them. Um, so yeah, I lean heavily into my husband, my friends, my family, my community. Yeah, they definitely carry me. They know exactly what I'm going through. They all know right now, and they get the truth when they ask me, "How are you?" I'll be like, "I'm freaking terrible today."
Mm.
So they're
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, that's good. That's such a strong skill set. And then you said that you were tapering off of SSRIs and getting off of
Mhm.
SSRIs. Is that true for this period of time that you're dealing with this? And, like, do you think about maybe picking it back up, or do you continue on the plan with the SSRIs and try to mitigate this without it?
It's a great question. So I've been on and off SSRIs since rehab in 2015. And multiple times I've gotten off of them and I've ended up getting back on them. Um, the 2 years ago, I got back on them because of panic attacks. And this time I've been completely off SSRIs since I think September of last year, 2023.
Mm.
But I had 3 or 4 good months until my my back injury before the season kind of got rough for me.
Mhm.
So I know that getting off the SSRI is not the problem. Does that make sense? Like,
Mhm.
because my addict brain and my nature, I try to assign blame to something, or I try to assign, okay, I stopped taking this, so it must be causing this, or I ate this today, so that's why I feel like this, or I didn't do this, so it's causing me to feel. So there's been times during the season where I'm like, this is because I don't have my SSRIs anymore. And I have to speak truth into that of like, no, you got through the hardest portion, which is the first couple months after you get completely off, and you were
Yeah.
great. So it's not that. It's not for me at this time, it's not a brain imbalance. It's again, it's ruminations, it's negative thought loops. So SSRIs have helped me tremendously, but like this time I want to try to do it without.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of suffering that goes into that. Like there's a lot of chose suffering that goes
Mm.
into that could end, you know, and could be a lot milder and I could still navigate it. But again, I have all the tools I need. And I don't think my life is ever going to be set up better for me to do this and for me to forge these coping skills that I've needed since I was a teenager that I completely missed because, you know, first my parents' trauma, then an addiction that went well into my 20s. So, yeah, it's time. I'm just working every week with a therapist and, doing the things I know I should be doing. I want to do it on my own this time. I'm avoiding even like a lot of people are like, well, you should start taking ashwagandha. You should start taking L-theanine. I am not going to use a substance this time. Like I want to do this,
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
saying that, I don't feel like saying that's making me feel a little like, oh, just it makes me nervous, honestly.
Hmm.
Like saying that, like, okay, I'm going to do this without medication is so freaking uncomfortable, man.
Hmm.
But it's what I want.
So I smiled there for a moment when you said chosen suffering. So I call it intentional suffering. My understanding of suffering is there's intentional suffering and unnecessary suffering. So you and your addiction, me and my addiction, unnecessary suffering, right? This is suffering that we put upon ourselves that sure we're tethered to this behavior because of a chemical dependency and also because of a psychological dependency, and then that doesn't even explain addiction, because dependency and addiction are two different things. Like there's this invisible threshold that you cross, and then once you're an addict, it's this whole other realm. But so there's this unnecessary suffering that can be within that area of things, and then there's intentional suffering. And for me, I think intentional suffering is doing things hard, purposely, going and doing very challenging things, like trying to, for the first time, get through a season like you're going through without taking even ashwagandha or something like that, and trying to get through it on your own through healthy behaviors and thought
Mhm.
processes, and whatever skill sets you're working on with your therapist. And that would be like this area of intentional suffering. And why would we intentionally suffer would be the bigger question. Why would you intentionally put yourself through that? Because you're probably not a masochist or something. And then
No.
and and the answer is because the long and the short of it, when we start thriving as human beings, we have the capacity to deal with what I call normal misery. And normal misery would be people die of cancer, people divorce, people do awful things to one another. You catch all the red lights when you're running late. Like you get fired from the job during Christmas season, right? Like this is normal suffering. Most things I think is normal suffering. And we either cave to normal suffering and we become weaker as people, or we mitigate normal suffering. The best way to mitigate normal suffering is by doing intentionally challenging things or intentionally suffering. And then the more you do intentional suffering, the less likely you are to fall into unnecessary suffering. So I like the way you put that, this chosen suffering. It is a time of suffering. But again, to go back to what you said a moment prior, was this is this is all with this hope of the other end, that
Right.
not only has experience taught you, but even biblically, I know you're a woman of faith. Even biblically, there's plenty of scripture out there to say, on the other end of this, you will be better for
Mhm.
it. I really respect that. Okay, so I know you had mentioned an experience with kratom, and I know
Mm.
this is such a big topic that I've had in the last year. I've had at least 5 people come into my practice. So there's been a lot of people. Well, I say a lot, but for my practice, for 5 people coming in for one substance that's relatively like newish, and then all
Yeah.
coming in and saying the same thing. I did not know. I did not
Dude.
know. I did not know that this thing was going to be something that I can become addicted to, or would make me relapse from a previous issue, or would become this new drug of choice for me.
I love talking about this because I too was very naive and I learned a good lesson from that. I thought I just didn't crave anymore. And so I was like, I'm good. Like not good. Obviously, like I had always told Chad, if somebody dies or I'm in a deep state of grief, like I'm going to want to be really careful, but like I don't crave. I just did it. And I was going to this herb shop and I loved the people that worked at the herb shop. And I would go in there for all my vitamins and supplements. And I was struggling with some anxiety, just a little bit. And I was trying ashwagandha, I was trying vitamin C, I was trying all these and I loved experimenting with this stuff. And I was in there one day and I had seen it was in a little case with green powder and it said organic kratom. It just looked like matcha. Like it looked so healthy and natural. And then one day I was in there talking about anxiety to one of the guys that worked in there. And there was this nurse from the local hospital and she was buying it. And she was like, this stuff has changed my life. It's helped my anxiety. And I'm like, okay. And the herb shop people are like, yeah, you should try it. And so I'm like, I trust them. I trust her, like medical professional.
Yeah.
Yeah. And here's where I messed up. The guy at the herb shop said, now don't trust what you read online about this stuff. And I kind of thought that was a weird thing to say, but I didn't Google it. I didn't do anything. And the first time I tried it, it was so subtle that I was kind of like, what was that? Like, did I feel something? I didn't really know. And I didn't touch it again for a while. And then when I did touch it again, I took a higher dose and I immediately knew it was dangerous. And that's when it was like that light switch was on for me. I began the internal discussion with myself of like, if you keep doing this, you're going to get addicted. Where's that going to lead you? No, it's fine. It's an herb. It's legal. You're overreacting. You know, these people, you trust them. They say it's fine. I see lots of nice looking people coming in there, buying it every time I'm in there. Like, just this dialogue, man. And I went down the road of it's fine. And I got to a point that I was still so aware of what was happening that I said, it's fine. If it gets bad enough, I'll check myself into treatment. That was my solution. But in this moment, I'm going to do it anyway. And so I took it for a few months and then I started seeing behavior changes in myself. I started not taking care of things as well. I started slacking at my job and that scared the hell out of me. I was like, okay, this is real. Like this is an addiction. This, because I had been undermining it the whole time. And so I went to my therapist at the time and I was pacing outside of his office and I had like 5 minutes and I was reciting, I'm addicted to kratom. I'm addicted to kratom. Because I wanted so badly to tell somebody, but there was so much shame around I relapsed. Like I did it. I am in an addiction again. I am hooked to a substance and I need help to get off of it. Like, how did you let this happen? So I went into that therapy session and just like the poor guy, he's like, hey, how's it going? I'm like, I'm addicted to kratom. And then once it was out, I could start to put the pieces back together. So I told him, he was like, it's not your fault. I have other clients this has happened to. They've been deceived. You were deceived. I came home. I told Chad and I told him, I said, I think I'm going to check myself in to treatment. And he's like, whoa, like what? He was just confused. He was like, what's going on? Like, you seem fine. And the withdrawals sucked. Like they weren't narcotic withdrawals. They weren't what I went through before, but they were enough. I didn't sleep for 4 days. Insomnia was wild. But yeah, coming out of that, and I've been fine ever since I got out of that. It wasn't like my first go around. Since the kratom kind of caught me off guard, as soon as I got through the withdrawals and the initial cravings that came with that, I was good. But there was this weird thought of like, did this happen because I'm not doing recovery well? Does that make sense? Because the circumstances were so wild. Like, I didn't go in there seeking something to relapse on. So, yeah, I just did a really big assessment when I got out of treatment for kratom of like, okay, where am I failing in my recovery program? What can I do better? And so that was 2022. But yeah, kratom was a slippery, slippery slope for me.
Yeah, um so you're probably an addict without me
Right.
diagnosing you.
Right.
Because
Seriously.
and probably the nurse that recommended it is not, and she's a normie and she probably uses it appropriately. And she can probably smoke a J here and there, and she could probably have some drinks here and there, and the 90% of the world can too. But then there's 10% of the world that will do exactly what you did and what I would do if I were to take it. I would take it, and I would be like, that I should probably just try a little bit more to see if it did what I thought it did.
Yeah.
Like, let's experiment and see, like, because maybe I'm just making it up in my head, like all sorts of ways to kind of make that
Yes,
tick.
exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
You nailed it.
Okay. So, yeah, thanks for sharing that, because I think it's an important thing that people just don't know about. People don't know about kratom.
No.
And people that do, generally, when you hear about kratom, when I do anyway, I shouldn't say you, but when I hear about kratom, it's a lot of what the facility's owner was telling you. Like, don't believe what's in the media. This stuff is
Oh,
great. It's helping out opiate addicts get off of opiates. It's totally
dude.
healthy, non-addictive, blah 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 blah. And so, yeah,
The local newspaper the other day they have a Facebook page, and they had an article where they had interviewed this lady, and they were publishing her story about kratom. She was in recovery from alcohol, and someone suggested kratom to help with withdrawals. And the story goes, she found herself addicted to kratom and had to go to treatment. And they weren't demonizing it. They actually said what you said of like, kratom can be risky for alcoholics and addicts. Like, you just have to be careful. And man, people came out of the woodwork to defend kratom with like this aggressive, like, how dare you talk bad about kratom? And I'm just thinking, like, if you're defending something this aggressively, something's going on. I'm not saying, like you're saying, I could see how people could use it instead of narcotics if you have chronic pain or something and you're not an addict. I could totally see it. But it's okay to say that kratom is dangerous for some of us.
yes, I couldn't agree more. Okay, so let's talk about your spirituality and how that has helped you through, I don't know, through mental health, through sobriety, or even through just your ongoing growth and resiliency and doing hard things.
Yeah, man. So that's another area of my life where you're going to get the honest truth, and you're not going to get what sounds good.
Good.
Because I have wanted faith as long as I can remember. My parents, we went to church occasionally, but it wasn't like, we didn't pray. They didn't talk about a creator. They didn't talk about God. Like, it was just kind of more of like, kind of like going to school. It was just something we did. Chad's faith is incredibly powerful. And I am scared of death. Like, I think a lot of people are. Like, the idea of ceasing to exist and what happens after that freaks me out. So, seeing that my husband genuinely isn't scared of that, and sometimes he talks about it like he's looking forward to it, and I'm like, whoa, bro, like, that's weird. Just calm down, I was like, I want that. I can't imagine what peace that would bring to me, and what peace it would bring to me as a control freak to know that someone else is in control of all of this. And, in NA and early on in recovery, the higher power and just getting outside of yourself, like, I need that. A lot of people need that, but my personality type, I really need it. So I have you ever like seen a relationship where one person decide they're going to be with the other person and the other person is like, okay, fine, like, and it's very one-sided? That's how I feel about my relationship with God right now. Like, I have decided that I'm going to follow him, and I've decided that I'm going to pursue him, and I've decided that I'm going to walk the walk, and I'm going to do my best to follow what the Bible says. And it's been years, and I'm waiting on a tangible faith. I'm waiting on the day that, like, I don't wonder, like, is this real? Is it? Am I sure? Like, I don't know. And that might never come from me. I mean, in the Bible, it talks about the cliche saying, like, the faith of a mustard seed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he put that in there for a reason,
Mm-hmm.
So my faith, I think it's done wonders for me. And I think it's connected me to some of the coolest, most inspiring people. But it is also a struggle for me. I get frustrated. I feel left out. I feel like I get mad at God. I'm like, if you're real, like, you know how bad I want this. Like, why? Like, just give me something. Chad had a tangible physical experience where somebody removed like an evil presence from where he was staying in Germany. And he witnessed like something that was there, and things that were happening immediately stopped. And I have friends who have had these spiritual experiences where it's just so undeniable, you know? And I think I selfishly like want something like that. And that might not be in the cards for me. This might be it, but I feel like I'm being very pessimistic. I'm trying to tell you exactly where I'm at with my faith.
Mm-hmm.
I choose to believe that this world did not get here because a bunch of rocks collided or there was some kind of random happenstance that created me and you and all of these things. I choose to believe that we have a creator. I choose to believe that he sent his son, Jesus Christ, to die for us. And I choose to believe that mainly because there's historical evidence of Jesus. And this faith and this religion has made it down thousands of years intact. And I've seen people leave this earth, and I've have friends recently who have lost people close to them. And I don't know, people who know Jesus and who follow him, they just do things differently. And I witness that. They do death differently. They do the day to day differently. And yeah, I want that. I want to be that, and I want that experience. So I'm doing it. I don't feel what I think I should feel, if that makes any sense. Um, and that might be my own self-sabotage, if that makes sense as well. Like, this might be what faith feels like, and I'm just expecting more.
Yeah.
But there are and have been a lot of moments where I have been in despair, or I have been in a panic attack, or I have been very confused. And I'll turn on a worship song and I'll praise and I'll sing and I'll raise my hands. Or moments when I'm in the shower freaking out in a panic attack, feeling like I can't breathe, and I call on the name of Jesus and I start praying out loud. And there is something comforting about that, and I can't explain it.
Yeah.
So it hasn't fixed things for me. I'm not cured. I'm not healed. I haven't had a miraculous anything, but there's something there that I want.
Mm-hmm.
That was a really long, odd answer to that question.
No, it was a great answer because it was very honest and again, brave, right? Like you're talking about being afraid of being viewed as weak by talking about these areas of challenge that you're in. I think it's the opposite when you're brave enough to speak up on that sort of thing.
Thank
I
you.
think from a faith perspective, I'm no theologian. I think there's the clear miracles that are unexplainable that happen and people experience. And I've experienced some of those myself. But for me, more to resonate where you're coming from, even with those experiences, I'm a more analytically driven human being. And the goosebumps and like those moments, they don't just come because I'm like, Holy Spirit, I want to feel you. So that's where, from the analytical side, it's like you said, historical evidence or just understanding the context of things that's going on biblically and using my analytical mind to understand that sort of stuff helps me because the evidence is so strong in one direction. And and there's assumptions in another direction, but the evidence is so strong, in my opinion, from seeking and learning, is so strong in one direction, it outweighs the evidence in the opposite direction that wants to.
Yes.
So yeah, again, I appreciate that authentic answer. So help me with this because I might cut this part out.
Yeah.
I purposely want to honor you and your experience and not shine a light on Chad.
Oh, you're sweet.
Because this is your episode. And like I said before we push record, I think your husband's awesome. So that's not because I don't like your husband. So I'm trying to figure, I want to ask a question that's essentially saying, what is it like to be married to a man like that? He can rev it up and he can pull something out of himself to go into doing challenging things has the capacity to do things that put people in shock and awe. What is it like to be married to somebody like that?
I love talking about him too, by the way. So don't feel, like he is my rock. And I think between the divorce rate between Navy SEALs and recovering addicts, I think we had like a negative 40% chance of staying married.
If we're just being mathematical about it.
Right. So being married to him is genuinely the best part of my life. But it is so rewarding and so stretching and pushing for me. And he does inspire me. Don't tell him. But he also, like, I can compare myself to him because my strengths and weaknesses, which I think a lot of people are paired like this, we're opposite. I am very connected to people and I'm very attention to detail and I curate things and I like order and I like structure, and he is resilient and he doesn't do well with like close relationships and emotions, and like what he is good at, I am not. And it's so extreme that this is just the truth. When I'm at home struggling with a panic attack alone in my living room, and like I'm in a fight that feels like I'm in a fight for my life, and he's out running some crazy race, and I know that his body is breaking down and he's able to stay mentally like honed in and good and complete this thing. I'm just there are thoughts that creep into my head is like, wow, like you can't even, and this, I know this isn't true. Just people listening and you listening, like this is just my negative self-talk, it's just like, you can't even keep your mental health under control in regular circumstances. And your husband's out there, like when he ran Cocodona this past year in the spring, midway through the race, it's freezing. He was in the back of the car and I was sitting with him while everybody went to get food so he could take like a 30-minute nap mid-race. He has like blood dried all over his face that's like pouring out of his nose. He's wheezing. He's really pale. He's shaking. He's hallucinating. And I'm just like, I get triggered by like if my body temperature changes too abruptly sometimes, it will like make me feel like a little off, you know? And this man is back here like, I'm worried about him dying. And he's like, I'm fine. I'm getting up. Let's go. And he keeps running. But being so close to him, I can see how that exact strength and resiliency leads to trouble for him in other areas of his life because he's able to just plow through things instead of taking the time to like feel, acknowledge, experience, or take care of what needs to be taken care of.
Mhm.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
So those insecurities I have usually go away because me and him are good at championing each other. Like he'll say, wow, you're really good at this. I'm not good at that, and vice versa. And I know the truth is we're just really different. But his faith has pushed me. His physical capabilities have pushed me and inspired me. The way that he pushes others and inspires others. And even a lot of his little sayings, like I would never tell him, but like controlling your rudder and like the words you speak and choosing what comes out of your mouth. Like a lot of those things I've taken on and adopted, and they've done wonders for me. So
Mm.
most all benefits from being with somebody like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The things that you speak out, you hear it in a different way than if it's just inside of your brain. So that can work in different
Yes.
ways. Like that can work in a negative way, where if you're speaking negative toward yourself out loud and it's just propagating what is already happening in here, then it's almost solidifying in a way.
Oh yeah.
But if you can reorientate that, not in a way that is positive, my personal opinion is shifting negative mentality for positive thinking is not realistic. I don't think it's realistic. I don't know anybody who can fake that. Because like, you're faking, and this isn't a fake it till you make it type scenario where it's just going to turn into something that eventually you believe in. But instead, if you shift negative thinking into reality thinking, then all of a sudden that's something where you're like, okay, the way I teach my clients is there's 3 processes to it. And one is, the first thing is assess the problem. So communicate with the voice in your head, talk to the voice, say, okay, like, what's your deal? What's your problem? And then something weird happens. It answers. Like, obviously it's you who's answering it, but it feels different. It feels like it's coming from a different place in you. So let's say if I'm having a thought that I'm stupid, because that would be a childhood trauma for me, is growing up with learning disabilities and not knowing how to read and all this stuff. And then I do something dumb, and then the voice is saying, well, you're an idiot, you're stupid, blah, blah, blah. And then I say, okay, well, what's your problem? And the voice says, in a weird way, it answers back, well, you're dumb, you're stupid. I'm like, okay. And so maybe I'd ask it another question or two, because it's kind of being a bully. And if you're ever dealt with the bully, you ask it a couple of questions, then you get underneath the surface type answer. So then you get the answer, well, you did something stupid. Okay. So I can clearly notice the difference. I did something stupid. It's not that I am something stupid. Okay. So after assessing the problem, then I validate the problem. Okay. So that's true. Like, I did do something stupid. So you got a point there. Thanks, internal critic, but actually accountability partner. Thanks. That's true. Okay. So what can we do about it? And then typically there's kind of an easy answer to the solution seeking. It's like, okay, next time do this differently, It's
Right.
like, okay. But that little dialogue and hitting those 3 points puts you into a state of reality thinking, where you're not like, yay, I'm clicking my heels, I'm fixed, and this is never going to happen again. It's like, no, I've observed the problem, I validated the problem, and now I've found a solution for it the next time it happens. And now I can move on with the scenario. I'm no longer hijacked for the next hour and a half.
Yes.
So anyway, that's my little 2 cents on it. But
Or use that.
In more detail, you have an episode where you kind of cover this, and on if you guys want to listen to the 3 of 7 project episode where Chad and Brooke are talking about resiliency. I can't remember the name of the episode, but
I think it's called like mental toughness and resiliency or something. Yeah.
And so I was going to ask you, okay, what are the ways to build up resiliency? But I think what we can do is, again, just check back into your sobriety story and look at how over a period of time you kept choosing to surrender a behavior, right? Surrender this substance that part of you so badly wanted to maintain a relationship with, and another part of you so badly wanted to disconnect from and lose that attachment with. But you slowly kept doing the thing that you know in the long run would be better for you. And you went into treatment this time, and then you went into treatment a second time. And then years later, you went into treatment a third time, right? Because you knew
just in case.
Just in case. And so that's window of tolerance, by the way. That's resiliency. That's a clear sign of it. Like it took you a moment of kind of investigating to figure out whether this was a real issue or not. But once you figured out it was a real issue, you're like, I'm not playing around with this. You went in like, and so think about the first time you went into treatment and the kind of the challenge of surrender there. Like you're like, you went in for 2 days and you're like, nope, not going to work. I'm out. Get me out.
Yeah.
Right. And then years later, you have this experience after sustaining sobriety, you have this experience. And then you're like, nope, I'm not playing around with this. Surrendered, boom, surrendered. And then, so that is resiliency. That's a perfect model of resiliency. Is it's built up over time, so much so that you get to the point to where you're doing things that you would have never have done years prior when you first started the journey.
Yeah. And I tidbit on that, like I knew I needed to be, we don't have to digress to this, but just to say, like, even if I think I could have gotten off the kratom at home, maybe once it was out, but I needed to be reminded of what I was capable of. And I knew that the choice of going to treatment was going to be the more uncomfortable one. But for me, it was like, that was necessary, you know? Yeah. I appreciate that. What you just said, that makes me feel like, okay, thank you.
Yeah. I really enjoyed having you on, Brooke.
Thank you.
My insecurity in the back of my head right now is like, Kenny, you talk too much in this episode.
No, you didn't. Are you serious? Oh my gosh.
Really appreciate having you on. Thank you so much for coming on the Patina'd Podcast. It's been an honor.
Thanks, Kenny. You definitely didn't talk too much. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Patina'd Podcast. There are other shows that emphasize resilience, but my intent is to normalize personal development through embracing challenge by interviewing the common man and woman, the person that you and I can relate to. If you are someone who wants to soak up the insights of normal people doing extraordinary things, please subscribe. If you know somebody who is overwhelmed by fear and complacency, please share this podcast with them. I'm your host, Kenny Hill, and I run a private practice near Sacramento, California called Recovery Hill. My website is in the description tab along with my social media links. The intro music was 2 in the Back, performed by Sunday at Slim's on Blue Dot Sessions.